Hello and welcome to week 3 of our Introduction to Literature class. Hope things are going well for you. Appreciated the work that you did last week on setting and point of view. There are a lot of great stories that we've read so far with amazing settings, whether it's Jude's house at the Round Earth's Imagined Corners, or a lot of interesting settings, and this is what it means to say Phoenix, Arizona, that desert landscape that they're driving through, where the jackrabbit jumps out, or how the Victor's father's trailer is described. And then one of my favorite settings from the semester personally is the Interlopers, which is let's see if I can switch this here. There we go. Which is such a wonderful setting for a number of reasons. One, it's an integral part of the story, right? They're fighting about this piece of land, these two families, for generations. Two, how the land is described. It's a narrow strip of precipitous woodland where there's not even good shooting or good game to be had. Makes you ask, why are these families fighting over this particular piece of land? And then finally, what the land comes to do to those two men. A big gust of wind comes through right before they're about ready to kill each other, knocks the tree over, and traps both of them down on top of that land. And if you think about it, that land has been trapping Geirrod, and Ulrich for generations. Those families for generations. They had no individual freedom. They had no right to choose what they were going to do with their lives because they were always pointed at destroying the other. And so even though Ulrich and Geirrod find themselves under that tree at that moment, they've been under that tree their whole lives. Their families have been under that tree for generations. And when they look around and see broken twigs and splintered branches next to them, we can even imagine those as some of the family lines that have died because of this land and because of the damage that's been done. So setting can be an interesting thing. Always remember, setting can be used a couple different ways. It can set the mood, how the story feels. It can give us character information. It can be an antagonist or an enemy. It can connect to theme, which is the big idea about life, and it can also act as a symbol. I think we see setting in the Interlopers in a number of different ways. It sets the mood. It maybe connects to theme and certainly tells us about character. It's an antagonist. It might even be a symbol. So, we're moving from setting last week to character this week, and you got 3 great stories that deal with wonderful characters. You're going to be reading Cathedral by Raymond Carver, Paul's Case by Willa Cather, and just to make sure I'm right here, I believe it, Everyday Use by Alice Walker. And I chose those stories because they're classics, all 3 of them. You're going to see in a lot of short story anthologies, but they also have wonderful characters. And this week's all about character. Characters are people in a story, imagined people in a story that inhabit a story. And we've come across a number of interesting ones already. One of my favorites from this semester was last week's story. This is what it means to say Phoenix, Arizona. Thomas builds a fire. Such a wonderful character. A teacher, a supportive friend, and a person who knows how to be loyal. And those are some of his character traits. I want to go through character really quickly and then finish up by talking about the stories for this week. So let's see if I can do this for us. Here we go. All right. Trying to get myself out of the way here. Let's try this. We'll just keep it like this. Now, character. When we're talking about character, there are some really interesting ways an author can express who a character is. You can tell about a character through actions, through settings, through body and clothing, through somebody's occupation, any kind of confrontations or conflicts, unique details. Sometimes the plot or the conclusion can also give us character information. When we talk about character, we can talk about motivation, what a character's motivation is. Those are reasons behind their behavior. We can talk about traits, ways in which people act, and we can talk about characterization, basically moments in a story where an author is reaching out to the reader to let the reader know who somebody is, to develop the personality of a character. An example of characterization that we might have seen is when Ulrich, lying under that tree, gets his little flask of wine out, gets the stopper off, and then takes a drink and looks over at Geirröd, who's over there, also under the tree, and offers him the wine. That's an interesting moment of characterization. It lets us know something about both of those characters. Now, this is a really important slide, really important information. Types of characters. We have flat, static, round, and dynamic. Flat characters are characters who typically only have one trait. They're either all good or all bad or all jealous or all selfish. You know, they're not complex, they're not complicated. They're rarely the central character. They're usually stock characters that represent a force or a particular way of being. Static character is a character that stays the same. They don't change, they don't grow, they don't learn. And static characters are often connected to flat characters. A character can be both flat and static. A round character is a character with complex details, complicated details. We see them in a number of situations. They could be contradictory to themselves. They might act kind in one part of the story and not kind in another. But we get a lot of moments of characterization for a round character. And then dynamic characters are the most important. Those are the ones that learn, that grow, that change in some significant way. And what they learn is often connected to what the story is saying about life, which is the theme. So a character's dynamic change often points us towards what the theme of the story is. We've seen some interesting dynamic characters so far in the stories. One for me that I really, really love is Victor from This Is What It Means to Stay Phoenix, Arizona. He doesn't change in a huge way, but that moment where he apologizes to Thomas and then offers half of his father's ashes to Thomas are moments where I see Victor growing and changing. He's connecting with people. He's letting people into his world. And that's something that he wasn't doing earlier on in the story. The road trip might have changed him in that way. And that's not an uncommon theme for road trips. Usually road trip stories have a moment where somebody learns, grows, and changes. And in particular, they learn in a way that when they come back to where they left, that place seems different or changed. So those are some interesting things about character. All right, let's see if I can get this back. All right, I can't seem to get... I'm still learning this program. There we go. That's a little better. All right. I'm still learning this program to do video casting. But anyways, that's character information. We covered a little bit about setting. You got 3 stories for this week. Cathedral, Everyday Use, and Paul's Case. All classics. Cathedral is a story about a husband and a wife. We don't get their names. They're literally called husband and wife. And they have a bit of a rocky marriage. But one of the characters, the wife, is having a friend come over for dinner, and craziness ensues. No. There we go. It's an interesting story. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this. Anyways. It has one of my favorite characters that we're going to read from the semester, Robert. Great name. And he's a friend of the wife's who comes over for dinner, and interesting things happen. That's Cathedral. You have Everyday Use, which is a story about a mother and 2 daughters. One daughter that takes place in the South. One daughter has stayed home. The other daughter is left to go to college. That daughter is coming back home for a visit, and there is a dispute about particular items at the house. I don't think you need to know much more about this story than that. It's written about the South. It's written about an African-American family, and it's written in the 60s, I would say early 60s. And there was a movement at that time led by people like Malcolm X for African Americans to convert to Islam, and in some cases change their names to reflect that conversion, and that's a part of this story as well. Finally, you have Paul's Case, a story written at the turn of the century about a young man named Paul who's really struggling to find himself in his home and in his relationship with his father. Paul's Case is a really wonderful story. It's a sad one too. But it has some interesting connections to even today's world. So we got Paul's Case, we got Everyday Use, we got Cathedral. Watch out for those dynamic characters, the ones that learn and grow and change. Think about what that change means for the bigger ideas in the story. And look out for moments of characterization, moments where the author develops the personality of the characters. You got a reading quiz and you got a discussion, both due on Sundays. And have fun this week with the stories. I look forward to your work and look forward to reading your ideas. Take care.